Well, we've finally seen the discless Xbox One.
It's been a couple days, and a lot of people have some very interesting thoughts.
Hot take!
Now, for those of you that may not know, there is a brand new Xbox One on the scene called the Xbox One S.A.D. It's not the real name, it's the Xbox One S All Digital Edition.
Do you think they had a whiteboard in the room and they could point out the fact that if you just...
I wish I could tell you that they knew what they were doing ahead of time, but...
I mean, their naming conventions have been all over the place ever since the Xbox One was pretty well shown off, right?
That's true.
Don't call it the X-Bone! Whatever you do!
The Xbox One S S.A.D. I'm just going to call it Xbox One S.A.D. Unfortunately, that's how abbreviations work, and everyone's going to be calling it this. Everyone has been calling it this, and it's made the console appear as a joke in the industry. A lot of people are looking at this thing because it's kind of bad. Now, why are people so upset with what this system is and what it represents? Well, Adam, you collect physical media for games, right?
Yes, I do. I very much enjoy that. I collect games.
So the Xbox One S.A.D. edition.
You mean the all-digital game console?
Yes.
What do I think?
What do you think?
Well, it's not something that I'm necessarily all that interested in, but because of what I know the unit is, I don't know all the facts. I feel like you know more about this, so maybe as we talk more about the all-digital Xbox today, I can be convinced.
Okay. Maybe. I don't think it's going to happen that way. But folks, here's how this is playing out. The Xbox One S All Digital Edition essentially is just a regular Xbox One S, but what they've done is they've changed the front plate where you find the disk drive.
Right.
So the disk drive has been completely removed. That doesn't mean all the components to get the disk drive to work have been removed, because everything else inside the system, including the eject button, which is still hidden behind the case itself, all of that is still in the console as it stands.
Can I bring up my little metaphorical comparison from before?
Do it.
It's like, you know, sometimes you hear about those cases where people go to the doctors and they're like, you have a tumor. And then they cut it open, they're like, there's teeth in the tumor and hair. Yeah. Like, that's what's going on inside of...
It's the worst comparison, but...
Oh my gosh, I had a twin?
It's apt. The problem is here is that the Xbox One S.A.D. edition, I hate to say it, but it really just works.
Keep going.
The S.A.D. basically has a gap where the CD drive would have been. Now, everyone that's looked at the system has said it's the exact same hardware inside. We're a little shocked by this. Now, the concept of taking out the disk drive was to lower the price of the system, and the price did lower by $50. If you get an Xbox One S, you will get, typically right now in a bundle, you'll get a game with it, maybe a couple of other items, and then you'll get the disk drive with it, and that's it. Now, the system right now, the Xbox One S, is on sale right now for the same price as the all-digital edition.
But the S.A.D's supposed to be cheap.
It is. So what's going to happen, apparently, is when the S.A.D. comes out, the S is going to raise back in price.
That's not how this is supposed to work.
No, but that's how it's playing.
The digital version's supposed to be that it's supposed to be dirt cheap. Like $100 less.
That's the problem, right? When we first talked about this and we were thinking about what the possibilities for this were, we assumed that the S.A.D. edition would be a lot cheaper, significantly cheaper, but that didn't happen. The system is only slightly cheaper compared to the other model, so there are some issues with this. First off, the price isn't that attractive. $50 less isn't really that big of a deal when you take into consideration that when you get an S, you're going to be able to just go and get a bunch of physical media at discounted prices. But when you get a digital edition, you're going to be getting digital copies of these games, likely at similar costs to what they would be new on store shelves.
I mean, let's not forget the used games. I like to buy used games.
Yeah, a lot of
people. If I wanted to get
do.
an Xbox, I would want to be able to go and get some cheap used games physically, and I can't do that with this system.
See, a lot of people out there may have been interested in buying a new Xbox, having one of the older models, the original, bigger models, moving to an S, maybe a digital edition. But if they have a bunch of physical games, they're not going to be able to make the move because those physical games are not going to make the transition with you. This is not a wise...
What if I push them very hard into the face plating? Do you think it'll eventually give way and then I can find some sort of a disk drive in there? You said it was removed.
There is the possibility that you could probably get the disk drive that they sell separately somewhere and put it in the system and get a different faceplate. But
what if I use my HD DVD player for the 360?
That goes far back. That's not going to work. Look, why we're really confused about this, and the general conversation that we want to have here today is if we think this is going to be a successful endeavor by Microsoft. Now, initially, my thoughts were this thing was going to be sold for cheap, and on that prospect, I did believe this would be a wise move for Xbox to go about this. But now, with everything played out and all the cards shown, I don't think this was a smart move in the slightest.
Yes. Yeah, you're spot on with the price point. I think another big part of what this machine should have been is a different form factor. Even though it would work the exact same way, like it has to look like something new, something that people want to get their hands on, right? Because sometimes all it takes is a little bit of like a change of face of the console. You know, make it look a little sleek, make this tiny digital box that you just have near your TV. It'd be very impressive.
Why didn't this console be made? Like, okay, here's the thing. To make the I'm not a super knowledgeable person in this, but clearly the size of the box does impact the price. The amount of plastic they have in there, the amount of metal they have in there, all that stuff is material, and that adds to the cost of the system. And because the system has this gap where nothing's in there, they likely could have designed a much smaller, more compact Xbox that could have been made with a much smaller box that could have had a smaller shipping container. All that stuff would make a much smaller price.
Now that you bring this up, it's like the mind wanders. Did they just have a warehouse full of Xbox One S's, and we're like, well, we have all this hardware, and no one seems to be buying the S's nowadays because the X versions are out. Can we just like repurpose them and change just a couple minute things and maybe like save money that way and make this the all digital console? Was this always their plan?
I really don't know. This doesn't make a lot of sense because it doesn't work out this way. What they've introduced is essentially kind of the fast and cheap way to make an all digital Xbox without all of the interesting things that could have arrived from making a digital only version of the system. So there's that problem there. Now, there are some games that get bundled with this system when you get it. So it's Forza Horizon 3, Minecraft, and Sea of Thieves. Now, I'm not saying Forza Horizon 3 is a bad game. It's actually quite good. I'm not saying Minecraft is a bad game because it's actually quite good. But Sea of Thieves is notable for having many, many problems, and to this day still has updates coming out to try and fix those issues. Those three games aren't really, in my opinion, console sellers. Minecraft is a dramatically old game, although Forza Horizon 3 did come out more recently. Sea of Thieves failed to meet the mark, and the game I would assume you'd want to be bundled with this would be the game everybody wants to play on the Xbox, which would be the Halo Master Chief Collection, because that has the games that a lot of people really want.
Yeah, Minecraft last gen was a console seller to an extent because Minecraft was still, there was the big bubble was still there. Wasn't Sea of Thieves, wasn't it a Game Pass game as well?
It is, yes.
So yeah, there's not a lot of value there as far as the title proposition is concerned.
When you get this, you do get a small Game Pass thing. I think there's like a bundle if you can pay $1 and get it for 3 months or whatever it is.
Sure.
But regardless, I don't think those are smart moves. If anything, the digital version should have been bundled with a 1-year subscription to Game Pass, a 1-year subscription to Gold to offset that cost, because what they've got going on now is a much more expensive system than what I think anyone was considering. And it just doesn't feel like something that should be jumping off the shelves. Now, there is something more to this. The fact that the Xbox One S exists on the market and it's not that much of a price, there are, like we just talked about, you can get the system for the same price that they're going to be selling the digital version. And I think that many consumers and even retailers out there are going to be not really wanting that thing to be purchased or sold.
Brick and mortar stores are not incentivized to be carrying this thing. That's what we've been talking about for ages. Even when we talk about, like we were talking about Stadia, for example. Are they going to sell Stadia controllers in a GameStop? No, they're not incentivized to do so.
It's like, when you really think about it, the idea is that if I got a Best Buy, if I'm the manager of a Best Buy and I'm looking to sell a bunch of product in the store, that includes like, okay, if I buy a Switch, I'm going to go back to the store and probably get more games from that store. If I buy a PlayStation 4, I'm going to go there and buy more games from that store. If I buy an Xbox One All Digital Edition, that's the end of the purchase, a connection with that store. Now, you might want to buy maybe some Xbox game cards,
some controllers.
Sure. Those are solutions there. But we already know, having had this discussion about Google Stadia in the past, that there's very few consumers out there in a large part of the U.S. that are capable of downloading games in a big way. So I don't think the way that this was presented the right way.
Where do you think these are going to be? I don't know if GameStop is going to be, unless somehow Xbox or Microsoft is pushing a bunch of money at GameStop. No, it's fine. Here's a bunch of money. Stock these things, because GameStop makes the bulk of their revenue, and it's a thin line.
Yes.
Like, we know GameStop's really hurting. It's off of used game sales, physical used game sales.
That's right. And look, I know it sounds crazy to think about this, but we're still in the market where physical matters. Now, what does this mean for the future of Microsoft's products? Now, right now, Sony did make that announcement with the PlayStation 5, and they put their hand down.
Their deck. They showed all their cards.
Look, folks, we're putting a disk drive in our next system. Don't even worry about it. Your PlayStation 4 games are going to work on this console.
It was one of the first things they said.
Yeah, right. And of course, a lot of people are crazy excited about that because backwards compatibility is important. Not only did they say that, but they went on top to go, hey, PlayStation VR, that's coming along too. You're going to be able to use the same headset from that system over on here. They might even just say same controller. Who knows? We really don't know right now. But what we can say is that really Sony is focusing a lot on the backwards compatibility of the system.
Yes.
Now, Microsoft's been following very much the same idea. But when you introduce a system, which I think is more of a test of the market to see if this can be successful.
It could be, but there's another way of looking at it too. You want me to go?
Go.
Okay, so is this their through line into their next generation, their Scarlet, their Anaconda, their next iteration of consoles? Are we going to be seeing a machine that's like very, very much leaning digitally now?
Here is
right.
This isn't this sounds bad, but like it. I hate this. It really sounds like it's going to happen. Look. What if the next Xbox system, the next line that they release, do not have physical disk drives?
That's what I'm.
They didn't sell as many Xbox Ones as they wanted to, okay? So
they had a bunch of S's in a warehouse, apparently.
And they're probably not worried about losing that many consumers onto the next system, because I think they really have to try again, basically. So if they introduce the next line of systems that doesn't have a disk drive, there's going to be a split. It's going to be weird, because we talk about splitting your market and how that's not a smart move. Well, what if you split the way people buy your games on your system? You can do that right now. Like, everyone that owns a PlayStation 4 can buy either a disc or a digital copy. Everyone that buys a PlayStation 4 Pro can do the same thing. Microsoft just introduced a segment of their audience that cannot buy physical discs. This is dangerous. How many discs do you release in store shelves when, let's say the next system has a digital version and a disc version? What happens if you literally split them down the middle and stores don't know how many copies of games to sell? Suddenly, physical units start getting tallied in a lot less of numbers, and we don't know if that's going to matter in digital. I think that it would be so important for Microsoft to have introduced digital codes alongside of the disc, so that you could actually go, okay, here's the disc, I can use this whenever, and here's my physical copy, or my digital copy that I can keep.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's bizarre thinking about how they've been approaching like legacy titles and stuff. Because it was like, oh no, it's fine, everything works on everything.
That's true.
And then they're like, no, this console is just this. Like, I'm imagining picking up the Xbox S.A.D, and like you said, I collect games, and I've been doing it for a while, and I have games that are games and systems both that are multiple decades old. This is a box that one day will break down, and the ghost of the titles that I purchased on this will just leak out into the ether, and it'll be a useless piece of plastic. I have a Genesis, I have a Sega CD, I have various PlayStation consoles, I have weird Virtual Boys and stuff, and they all still work today, and all the titles still work with these.
To Microsoft's credit, if you go right now online on Windows 10, you can actually go to their Microsoft storefront, and you can see those games there. Your digital purchase history is being held within your Microsoft account. They're doing a good job of digitizing all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Xbox original games, 360 games, Xbox One games. I will keep saying this again and again. The Xbox One X is one of the best platforms on the market, especially for backwards compatibility, because everything just works, including the original discs from all the way back. But when you remove that functionality, then suddenly it becomes a little bit weird.
Talk about weird messaging, eh?
Yeah.
Oh, it's fine, everything works. Wait, no, wall.
And you know what? The messaging becomes even more of a problem when you really look at that name. Look, I know it sounds kind of stupid to look at the name and really like rip that apart, but every time a company does something that's a little bit strange or questionable, it causes issues. Calling it the Xbox S.A.D edition isn't a good idea. Anyone in the marketing department could have said that, but is the idea that we're going to make fun of the system's name and then hopefully that makes it successful, or was it like some internal thing where they didn't think this was going to be a success and they were just like, whatever, we're just gonna throw this out?
I'm sure people were discussing it. I think folks just didn't bring it up. It's like, oh, someone else will bring it up, I'm sure. Like, it was probably just a lot of people that didn't want to get fired. They're like, it kind of spells out.
Look, naming for your products is so important. After the Wii U, I think.
Oh my
everyone can
gosh,
really
absolutely,
understand that.
yeah.
And after the Xbox One, which caused confusion, I think they could understand that too. So every time you make a product that has a very strange name, it causes problems. And I think that they are getting to that situation right now where they're clearly not thinking about the way that their products are named, what that impact is on the market, and how confusing it is to people to see things. Look, the PlayStation 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 4 Pro, those like naming schemes make sense. The 4 Pro, what is the 4 Pro? Even if you've never heard of the 4 Pro before, you just know PlayStation 4, right, and then there's a Pro model. That's all you need to know. It makes sense.
We've had Pro tacked on to other things as well, like the iPad and stuff. It is something that people can understand from like tech.
Blenders have a Pro model. Everybody
exactly.
knows, like blenders, toasters, these things exist. That's not a strange thing. Yeah, it does 5 pieces of toast at the same time.
I need one of those.
It's not unheard of to have those kind of naming schemes.
Yeah.
But when they introduce naming schemes like S, X, right? Yep. Now S.A.D,
yep,
it gets really confusing. An average consumer that walks into the scene right now, goes to a store and sees these systems on, if they even happen to see an original Xbox still box somewhere, I doubt they would, but they would probably see the S model, the S.A.D model, and the X model, and they're not going to know what the difference is between that naming scheme.
Think about it like this. Like the best case scenario is that every single employee that works at a place that sells consoles, they have to explain to every customer that buys the Xbox S.A.D that this is only digital, you can't buy physical games for it. Worst case scenario is that, well, there are like family members that go out to buy this thing and they don't understand how all this works. They just see something that says Xbox on it, they buy it, and then they buy a bunch of games for it, and there is mass confusion. And yeah, like,
I mean, Microsoft could even play with their history in the past and appeal to some like hardcore gamers out there by making this model kind of appeal to an older sensibility for gamers that maybe are not okay with physical, but remember a time when many games were digital. Why not call it the Xbox Digital Only System? DOS. A lot of older gamers out there would have found that
That's
pretty
clever.
They would have found it fun.
That's
and
clever.
then, maybe make a neat like kind of theming thing, so when it starts up it has like the DOS start, something that makes it more exciting and interesting, like a collectible item, which could really drive a lot of people to do that. But instead they chose S.A.D, S, and X, and that isn't a smart move. Now, look, we are very early in on this. We don't even know if this thing is going to be successful or not. Personally, though, I have my own opinion. Adam, what do you think? Is this going to be a success?
No, I think I've pretty well voiced what I think at this point. Like, if it was a smaller price point, I might think about jumping on board. The software still isn't quite there for me as far as like titles. Forza, I'm not huge into. I can appreciate it for what it is. Sea of Thieves and Minecraft, like whatever. But even when I think about the totality of the lineup, I can play most of what is offered on that system on my PC right now.
Sure.
So I already have a digital way of accessing most of those games. Rare Replay, I think, is the only thing that I can't access at this point now that, was it Sunset Overdrive?
Yeah.
Is now playable on PC. So yeah, this is certainly not for me, not at this price point, at $250. Yeah. And like I said, this is a box that I can't collect. It will die one day, and then when that dies, it is like if my Genesis dies, I still have all my games on my shelf. Yep. Same thing with my PlayStation 4. If my PlayStation 4 dies, I have all my games.
And see, I have the same idea, same mentality here. I honestly believe that this could have been a success had it been done a little bit differently. Had the price been a lot lower, I think it would have worked.
Better form factor, yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Had it had some different theming, it might have seen more success as well too. I personally don't believe that what they're doing right here makes a whole lot of like a good kind of package for consumers to get into. Seriously, if Microsoft is thinking about doing more of these digital-only versions of these systems, I don't know why the S was the one that got cheapened, because it didn't get that much cheaper. The
Big
X,
warehouse.
Yeah, well, the X.
Filled with S's.
Think about the Xbox One X. That is the most expensive system they're selling. If they removed some functionality from that and made that cheaper while keeping the ability to play games at a great way, that may have probably found a better path
Like drop that price down and then drop down the Xbox One S price to like $250 or $200 or whatever. That might have made a little bit more sense.
We're kind of getting into the market right now where we're seeing a lot of systems trying to compete on price. Sony is probably going to be releasing PlayStation 4. I don't think Sony, the current PlayStation 4 Slim model that they have now, I think there's going to probably be a third model of that, because they traditionally do multiple
there is like that very last ditch, like, okay, here's the last sort of elite version of the console, let's say. We may see something like that trickle out, but
something like that, maybe like a slimmer version of the PlayStation 4, two models that kind of stack side by side. I think those systems are going to be made a lot cheaper, and that's going to be Microsoft competing against them. And I think maybe the digital version is just a reach out to be like, okay, if we have to, we can drop this price even more. With that being said, there also is the concept out there that that Nintendo is releasing a Switch that is going to be cheaper as well, and then suddenly that version is going to be a lot cheaper. And look, there's a lot of things riding against Microsoft on this. Hopefully they find some success. I just don't believe it's going to happen. But folks, what do you think? Do you think Xbox is going to find a way out of this? Do you think that the digital version makes sense? Or do you think this whole thing is just sad?